Hey guys, I'm learning TFT. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to position every unit in set 14 using the Meta TFT team builder. They have statistics on per hex win rate. And so we're going to use these stats for every unit in set 14 to figure out optimal placement. By sharing my learning process with you, I can learn more effectively myself, and hopefully you can learn in the process as well. So this will be a collaborative process where I'm going to figure out kind of on the fly why each unit is good in which hexes, and also look at their traits, their abilities, to kind of reverse engineer why a unit is good on those hexes. If you have thoughts, comments, questions along the way, feedback on maybe I got something wrong or additional ideas, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below as we go, especially if you can include a timestamp to the section of the video that you are referring to. So as I normally do before I dive into the analysis, I'm going to go through a meta mindset of the day, which if you're new to my channel is designed to give you a big picture meta approach to improving at TFT. This is both useful for TFT as well as in life. Of course, if you want to jump straight into how to position every unit, take a look at the description. I'm going to include timestamps where you can just jump straight to the video itself. So today's meta mindset of the day is confusion is the beginning of mastery. And so this prompt is related because we are approaching a new set. PBE just came out this last week. The new set's going to go live, I believe, in a week and a half or so. And I was talking to my son. He's 8. He's played for about a year and a half, 2 years, maybe 3 years now. And every time there's a new set, he was just actually saying today that he's kind of feeling sad or disappointed that the new set is coming out because all of the information that he mastered from the last set is getting thrown out the window. And so he's like, I'm gonna suck. I feel like I'm so lost. So that's kind of what I really want to focus on in today's meta mindset of the day is the confusion that you feel at the start of a new set or maybe at the start of a new patch and how to kind of lean into that. So the first step is the unknown. Kamal Ravikant said, here's what I've learned about habits and patterns that don't serve us. There is a moment of decision where two paths stretch out in front. One choice calls for the old familiar, the other unknown. Magic lies in the unknown. So this is kind of more of a psychological idea that a lot of times we kind of lean away from the unknown. We get scared of it, like my son saying that he's afraid of the new set. And this can happen in life a lot of times too, where we get stuck in these familiar patterns, we cling to the past, and sometimes life throws curveballs our way, just like a new set does. And what Kamal is saying here is that there really is magic in the unknown, and that's a large part of why I really enjoy playing TFT and what I find magical about TFT. The set cycle is part of the magic of this game, compared to a game like chess that hasn't changed in, I don't even know how long chess has been around, like hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so that's part of the beauty of playing a game like TFT. And the more we can lean into it, the more we can enjoy the game. Anthony DeMello said in his book Awareness, it's not that we fear the unknown. You cannot fear something that you don't know. Nobody is afraid of the unknown. What you really fear is the loss of the known. That's what you fear. So when you feel lost like this and it feels like there's chaos swirling around you, that you feel lost in, like, let's say TFT as the new set's coming out, you have no idea what any of the units do, what any of the traits do. Maybe this is your first time playing TFT. At least, you know, if you've played TFT before, you have some kind of model in your mind of reprints of units and traits. But DeMello is saying that what you really fear is losing out on all of the information that you gathered and a sense of almost like identity loss or like ego loss. And yet that, again, I think is part of the beauty of TFT is, especially the world that we live in today, the 21st century, change is accelerating. The amount of unknown that is coming our way is rapidly accelerating, especially with technology and AI evolving so quickly. And so what Tamello is calling out is that what you really are afraid of is the loss of the known, the skills, the knowledge sets that you had in the past that may not be relevant anymore. When you think about people losing their jobs, what he would argue is that you don't really fear the unknown of what's coming. It's that you kind of have to learn to let go of the skills, knowledge, career path that you were on, and embrace the change and the unknown of the future. But you can't really lean into the unknown and start preparing for the next set if you don't acknowledge that fear and that sense of mourning of the loss of the unknown. Koster and Wright, in their book, The Theory of Fun for Game Design, said that noise is any pattern we don't understand. So at the beginning of a new set, it can all look like noise, but as you start to pull in all of this data and fit all the puzzle pieces together, then that noise becomes a clearer, more cohesive picture that starts to form a sense of signal that makes sense to you, right? And that is actually essential to any game. A game would not be fun if there weren't patterns that we didn't understand, if there wasn't noise that you have a job to turn that noise into signal. And so a game like chess where everything is known, and I mean, your understanding of the game becomes clearer over time, but I think a big part of why TFT is so fun is that it is a forcing function for you to deal with noise. And I think that becomes a really valuable life skill as, again, the world is rapidly accelerating in the amount of noise that's being thrown your way. And I talked about in my last video in the meta mindset that the amount of data and information that's being produced on a daily level is just rapidly accelerating and just a deluge of information your way, lots of noise, right? And so the more that we practice learning how to turn noise into signal, making sense of the picture around us, of the all the confusion, the more comfortable over time that we get with all that change and all that sense of loss, right? And so it's practice both for TFT. Every time you approach a new patch, new set, you actually learn to get more comfortable with this idea, which is more generally an extremely valuable life skill, but also just for TFT specifically, you will learn to be a better TFT player the more you learn to embrace that change. They also say all art and all entertainment are prodding us toward greater understanding of the chaotic patterns we see swirl around us. And so it's a way for these patterns of the unknown to seep into our subconscious and to make sense out of it. And that's the beauty and fun of art, entertainment, and games. That's why mystery, movies are so fascinating, because you have this puzzle that is thrown at you and you want to try to figure out how to make sense of the chaos. And that, in large part, is what a game is. All right, change. Eric Hoffer, the philosopher, said, it needs inordinate self-confidence to face drastic change without inner trembling. So this goes back to this idea of that DeMello is talking about, where what we fear is loss of the unknown. And loss of the unknown is drastic change. And, again, the world is changing so rapidly, just politically, the climate, technologically, there's so much change occurring in the world. And Hoffer says that from a psychological standpoint, it's extremely hard for us to deal with that change. It's normal for my son to have challenging feelings when it comes to a new set. And yet, learning how to do that helps us build confidence. And again, it can be part of the fun of the process. Yuval Noah Harari said, people are usually afraid of change because they fear the unknown. And so he's kind of saying this in opposition to DeMello, but he continues to say, but the single greatest constant of history is that everything changes. And so again, that's why I think TFT is a great metaphor for life, because TFT changes so rapidly. And the more that we can learn to sit with our emotions of that fear, whether that's fear of letting go of what we know or fear of approaching the unknown and the chaos, what he points out is that this is the constant of history. The only constant is that everything changes. And the more we can learn to embrace that change and maybe even enjoy that change, the more fulfilling our lives are going to be, the more we can surf the waves of change, right? As opposed to resist it and have those waves smash against us. George Lichtenberg said, I cannot say whether things will get better if we change. What I can say is they must change if they are to get better. And so this idea is related to sometimes people get stuck in the past. In fact, there are minority of people in the world who just don't even leave their homes because they're too scared to go out into the world and to live their lives. They get permanently stuck in the past. And so again, when we can, and you can see that with certain TFT players too. And I was like that when I used to play Warcraft 3 in high school. This was back in the late 90s. And when the expansion pack came out, I was like, it's too much change. I don't want to learn this. And I was like top 50 Warcraft 3 in NA back then, and I didn't want to learn the expansion. So I was like, okay, I just quit, right? And I suspect that that's also common for TFT players, especially newer players. But at the same time, that change, the new expansion, the new patch, like that's also what keeps us coming back. And the more that we can, again, embrace that change, the more opportunities we have to get better. Because one of the really interesting things about changing environments, changing patches or sets, is that you can start to notice the patterns that I refer to as the fundamentals that don't change from patch to patch or set to set, which is also what I'm trying to do with these videos, is to get at the abstract layer, the derivative of what we are trying to look at, to the thing that won't change. And so when I'm going to go through this analysis of where these units are optimally placed, that's kind of the lens through which I will filter like the learnings that I'm getting, so that hopefully, what you're learning here is not just set 14 optimal placement. What you're learning is from patch to patch in set 14, if some of the units change, get their abilities changed, or in a future set, is set 15 has a bunch of different units, how you can apply these principles yourself from these learnings so that you don't need someone else to tell you how it works, right? And that's when you can really hit this escape velocity in both TFT and in life, is when you learn how to apply these more abstract strategic principles yourself, as opposed to following what other people are going to tell you. All right. And then lastly, adaptation. Salim Ismail, Malone, and Geist, in their book Exponential Organization, said, for leadership of any kind, but especially for CEOs, and I've read a lot of like executive consulting organization books because I coach startup founders and I used to run my own startup. It is becoming increasingly apparent that their duties, especially those that are externally facing, are shifting from operating in a predictable world where the scaling of efficiencies is the dominant strategy to a world in which adaptability and disruption represent higher order competitive advantages. So in the past, the big companies, this was especially before like the 2000s, in the past, the most high performing CEOs were the ones that could optimize like high efficiency, especially in the industrial revolution, like just get people to work at a very hyper efficient level. And that was the dominant strategy. Once technology came and it disrupted everything, and it allowed small companies to like challenge the incumbents, the super large companies, everything changed. And so now in today's world, if you want to succeed in a career sense, the best way to do that is to learn how to be adaptable and to disrupt both other people and yourself. As opposed to, and a big part of that is leaning into the unpredictability and the chaos in the world. Because that's where, especially if you are not the current winner or incumbent or dominant, monopoly force, you actually prefer to have unpredictability. That's why a lot of times some players like playing Ambessa encounter from set 13, because those emblems give you the opportunity to beat someone who may be significantly better than you, right? And so the more you can learn how to adapt and disrupt when there is this sense of unpredictability, that becomes a huge competitive advantage for you, both in TFT and in life. And so that's kind of what I try to teach my son, is that, like, yes, when you think about the new set, like, yeah, he loved playing family reroll this last set. He's like, oh, I need to figure out a new 1-cost reroll. Like, yeah, but you can also figure out, what did you learn from last set about playing 1-cost reroll? Like, what augments were good? When do you roll? How do you itemize them? You know, all these fundamentals, the things that don't change, how do you take those learnings and figure out how to apply it to this new set? And the more you can do that, that becomes a competitive advantage over the long haul in life. But just as importantly, it's the confidence that you gain, how to sit with the discomfort and the feeling of fear when you approach the unknown, and letting go of the known, because that's just as important as your knowledge. Because there's so many people in the world that when they're faced with that unknown, they freeze, they give up, they don't want to try. And so the more that you can lean into this and to learn how to adapt your mental state, your knowledge set, and even your sense of self-identity around, like, oh, I'm a 1-cost reroll player, or oh, I'm this, or oh, I'm that, or oh, I am an engineer, or oh, I am this, right? Like, I was I was an engineering major in college. Then I joined a business fraternity and I founded my first startup coming out of school. So then I was, and actually while I was in school, I interned at Microsoft as an engineer. And then the following year, my junior year, I interned at Google as a product manager. Then I started a business, so I was an entrepreneur. And after that, I wanted to do coaching, so I became a coach, and I'm a father. So much of adaptation is also a sense of, like, letting go of the role and identity that you set in your mind that puts you in a box that limits what you believe that you are capable of. So a large part of this is not letting both yourself put yourself in a box and not letting other people put yourself in a box. And that's, again, what I love about TFT is it forces you to confront the sense of change from the game, which is a huge opportunity for you to practice leaning into adaptation. Steve Forbes says, you have to disrupt yourself or others will do it for you. So you can stick to the past, to cling to what you know. And eventually, as change gets thrusted your way, you will get disrupted by the other people around you, right? Like, you see this in new sets or new patches. If a patch nerfs a dominant S+ tier comp and you keep playing that, well, you're gonna get, your LP's gonna fall, right? If you don't lean into the change, you don't start learning, you don't disrupt yourself, others are going to take advantage of that. But if you can lean into the disruption, to the change, and get ahead of that, then you actually have an advantage over the other people. Eric Hoffer said, we can never be really prepared for that which is wholly new. We have to adjust ourselves, and every radical adjustment is a crisis in self-esteem. We undergo a test. We have to prove ourselves. That's in his book, The Ordeal of Change. And so I think this idea captures the whole idea of TFT and why I think it's a beautiful game. It's a challenge not to your intellect. It's a challenge to your sense of identity, your emotional self-esteem, your psychology. And I think that's actually the larger, more valuable thing that when I think about my son playing TFT, that I hope he is able to learn from this game. You know, it's not so much like chess, and my son does play chess, but chess, you're kind of going deeper layers of what you already know. Whereas for TFT, I think the thing that's always relevant is that you're constantly being thrown off guard in these new and novel, interesting ways. There's puzzles and challenges, encounters, hacks, whatever. And it's a constant test to reprove yourself, a crisis in self-esteem. And yet I think that's one of the most valuable skills that you can learn in life, is how to confront a situation where you have no idea how to go from point A to point B and you have a goal, and how to navigate that maze and that path. And every time you do that, you gain a little confidence, you gain a little self-esteem. And the more you do that, the more that you can start being anti-fragile, embracing the unknown, embracing the change. All right, so that's our meta mindset of the day. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And you know, confusion is the beginning of mastery. That the more we can lean into the sense of mystery, yes, there is the foreboding in the dark clouds and the swirling chaos around us. But if we have faith that we can follow the light and find a path forward, there's beauty and mystery and awe in that unknown. And that's what I love about TFT is, yes, at the beginning of the set, it's like, okay, there's chaos, but a little bit at a time, and that's what I'm doing with these videos. We can lean into making the puzzle pieces make a little bit more sense. And by the middle of the set, it's like, oh, it's like that moment when it all clicks. Like that's what makes it so, like, feel so good to me. And then when you're able to, you know, have your LP follow that as a result and compete and like hit whatever goals you have, that's the beauty to me of TFT. And I love that process and that cycle of change and mastery over time. All right, so let's go into what you came here for, which is how to position every unit in set 14. So I'm going to start with the Nitro summon just so I don't forget about it. And then after that, I'll just go through by order of cost. And part of this analysis, keep in mind, is PBE sample size is small. I suspect some of this data will change. Some of the units may get reworked. Some of the units or traits might change. I don't think it should change that much, but maybe there's a one-off here or there. And if that does happen, I would appreciate if you could comment in the description or comment to this video so that others can be aware. And this process will also help us get a better understanding and familiarity with the units themselves. All right, so this summon trait is a unit that becomes a T-Rex at 200 chrome, and otherwise is like kind of a smaller unit before then. Fires grenades at the nearest enemies, dealing magic damage and stunning them. So you probably want to place this R080T in front of the enemy's main tank so you can try to stun them. But you don't want it to take aggro right away, because if it dies before it casts the stun, then you kind of waste it. And then when you get 4+ in Nitro, it fires a giant laser, which I believe it can hit the backline. So if you happen to know, please include a comment and include a timestamp to the video. But for that reason, you can see here that the win rate is highest on the left 2, and then over here next. So I wonder if that's because, let's say there's an enemy Poppy here and an enemy Kindred here. Let me see if I can make this slightly bigger. Yeah. So if you happen to know or have tested this, I suspect that if it fires this way, it could hit backline. So that's a key idea with this robot, or when it becomes a T-Rex. So let me see if I can make it. No, it doesn't change. But ideally, you want to position the same side to hit the backliner, especially if you have like a 200 stack T-Rex that deals a lot of damage. Trying to figure out the optimal way to place it to hit backline is really valuable. And because Nidalee, the way Nidalee works, also hits, depending on how many amps you have in, hits the nearest like X units. So if Nidalee walks up here, is able to hit this and this, you might be able to just like kill off their backliner as a combo. So the key idea here with this is it's usually going in the front line, because I think when you're playing Nitro reroll, usually Shyvana is like your main tank, and you don't really, your tank You don't have that much frontline. I think it's usually like this. So it's usually part of your frontline, and you want to be able to get that backline access. All right, so I'll just start with a general analysis of all of the frontliners in the set, because the way you position them is mostly the same, with the exception of, I believe, Bastions. So the way Bastions work is they gain armor MR, and for the first 10 seconds of combat, Bastions increase their bonus by 100%. So what that means is you usually want to place your Bastions on the outside of your front line. So if the enemy carry is like over here, then it's going to hit the outside of your front line first, which means that you get more efficiency from your Bastion units getting that 100% armor MR boost during the first 10 seconds of combat. The same can be slightly said for Vanguard, because they get a shield, 50% shield for the first 10 seconds of combat. So basically, Vanguards and Bastions you want to have on the outside. Whereas this is if you have a mixed frontline, which is not always the case. Whereas Bruisers don't really have a buff at the beginning of battle, so if you have a hybrid frontline, you want your Bruisers in the middle. Alright, so Alistar, nothing really special. Usually you're just placing your main tanks in the middle. That way you don't get wrapped. And what I mean by wrapped is, let's say someone's playing like a Graves. If you have your front line over on this side, but your main carry is, over here, then Graves can just walk up and attack your backliner, right? So you want your main tank like kind of in front of or in the middle, because Graves is going to walk here before he's going to walk here. That's why for the most part main tanks are going to be in the middle, unless there's something special about their spell that can hit a backliner. So Alistar does stun the current target, so you want to put Alistar in front of the enemy main tank. So let's say they have a Sejuani, then you want to put Alistar right in front of the Sejuani, so he can stun the Sejuani, which will slow down Sejuani's ability to like cast, right? Whereas if there's like a tank that heals, like let's say Gragas, you put, let's say this is a 3-star Gragas, then stunning this Gragas might allow you to kill it before it's able to cast. All right, Mundo gains HP and heals, nothing special. So yeah, just middle. Also, some of these stats are going to be skewed because like you're not really playing 3-star Mundo that often, and if you're playing main tanking, the stats in the middle are going to be different than the stats from the side. But I don't think there's anything that special. Same with Jax, like nothing too special. I think in the situation where you have a hero augment, then yeah, for adaptive strikes, basically he becomes a carry, then you want to put him on the side. So I suspect that some of these like higher win rate ones are when you have the hero augment, in which case melee carries you usually want on the side to try to wrap, or one hex back in behind primary tank to keep them safe from an enemy carry who's like over here, right? You don't want to take your Jax to take aggro right away, unless your Jax is very tanky, like you have a BT Titans like 3-star already, then taking aggro in the beginning might be okay, or if you have like an Edge of Night. All right, Kindred's the first main carry. Usually your carries are going to be in the corners here. Although sometimes if it's like a secondary carry or trait bot, you'll see their win rate's going to be higher in the middle here. The way Kindred's set up, you basically would just put Kindred in the corner. Same with Kogmaw. Kogmaw is a scaling champion with Rage Blade, so corner is usually going to be more effective. That's if you are main carrying them. If you're not main carrying them, you can just kind of put them in the middle. Morgana can be like a Morello spreader, and so then you could put her right in front of, usually in the middle, but right in front of the enemy main tank, so that, let's say Sejuani's here, but your Morgana with Morello's here, and they have like extra units here, well then if your main carry is dealing damage to Sejuani, then let's say this Kindred's dealing damage to Sejuani, but this Sejuani has like a redemption for healing, you're not actually applying the anti-heal, right? So usually it's going to be same side and right in front of the enemy carry if they have anti-heal. Nidalee is a magic fighter, melee, so usually you're going to put her somewhere on the side here and or second row to keep her a little bit safer if you are itemizing her. If not, then she's just kind of like part of your front line, so it's not that big of a deal. Poppy usually we talked about outside is better than inside. You could see that in this win rate, 50% in the middle, whereas it's 55, 53 on the outside. Also, she throws a buckler at the farthest enemy within 4 hexes. So I suspect that's why outside is so much better, because 1, 2, 3, 4 only goes here, does not hit the outside corner, right? And usually enemy carries will be, you know, here or here. And so at least here, 1, 2, 3, 4 can go, but it will also hit 1, 2, 3, 4 or 1, 2, 3, 4. Whereas if you put him on the side, put her on the side, it really maximizes the odds of hitting here. So Poppy, it looks like this left hex, A1 I believe, I don't know what the actual notation is, but top left is the best spot, and then here can go 1, 2, 3, 4 as well. So really important, can make a huge difference in the fight, because especially if you have more backline access, like we were already talking about, you might play Poppy with the T-Hex to hit the backline plus the Nidalee with Amp. If you put Poppy, T-Hex, Nidalee, and they can all snipe down the enemy backliner, even if they have a super tank here, you could just kind of cheese the fight that way. All right, Seraphine, the way she works is similar to previous sets where she fires a sound wave through the current target. So it's like an AoE wave. So like, let's say they have like something like this, right? She fires a blast that goes all the way through here. And so what that means is you usually want the opposite side enemy carry from their main tank. So if it's like this, you know, then you're only kind of hitting this and you miss their enemy carry. Sometimes that means middle is actually better, depending on how the enemy is positioned. And again, this is if you're main carrying her. But that's why usually this outside seems better. But you basically want the opposite side enemy carry with Seraphine. Shaco is a melee carry, and he teleports behind the lowest health enemy within 3 hexes. This was actually 4 before, so a lot of this positioning could change depending on if they modify his spell. But even with 3 hexes, like if we look at the stats here, it looks like right over here or left is more optimal than middle. So you don't really want to do middle because you want the opportunity, for example, to walk up here and then teleport behind the lowest health enemy within 3 hexes, which is 1, 2, 3, right? But if you position Shaco here, walks up here, 1, 2, 3, can't get to this, right? But over here he can. So for the most part, you want to position Shaco on the right or left on the same side as the enemy carry. Like, well, this is harder. Even though this higher win percentage, that's interesting. But like, let's say Poppy's here, then you could walk up here, and then this can be 3 hexes, right? So melee usually on the side, but especially the way Shaco's spell works, lowest health enemy within 3 hexes you want on the side. Sylas, nothing too special. Like, should just be in the middle here. Vi, same kind of thing. Shields, deals damage, yeah. In the middle. Zyra stuns, deals magic damage, smaller Vayne than the nearest target. If you're main carrying her, you know, corner. But if you're not main carrying her, the stun is still useful. It's probably useful to put it in front of their main tank. I suspect that's why, like, these 3 in the middle, 55, 54, 54-ish, put her in front of the enemy main tank. Like, if they're, again, Sejuani, it can help them take longer to cast, which could make a big fight difference. All right, so that covers the 1 cost. Now going into the 2 costs. Darius, the Bruiser. He does spin in a circle, I believe, similar to set 13. So, and then increases the range with the Kingpin bonus. So usually that means middle, right? That's why 54.8% in the middle is the highest. Because you want your opponents, like let's say, you know, they're positioned like this. You want your opponents to walk here, walk here, walk here, and then spin to hit all of them. If, for example, they started something like that, but let's say you have, you know, units like this, then Darius is only going to hit this, and then, you know, this Poppy walks here, attacks this attacks one of these, and then Darius doesn't get that value on his spin. So usually you want Darius right in the middle. Oftentimes, if you are going to carry, like main tank or / carry him, or even if he's just an item holder, like he can item hold like a BT Titans Sterax for example, then you want him almost like solo frontline, and then you can like put, you know, extra units like back here or even back here. Like I've seen people with Stone Plate to get that extra value, because that way he just gets way more value from his ability. Ekko, he heals and deals magic damage to the current target. Nothing too special about Ekko. He is a frontline tank because Strategist gives him extra durability. It's interesting that he's high here, but low frequency. I don't know why it'd be significantly higher on the sides. And in fact, like I mentioned earlier, if you're playing Strategist with Bastions, then you want the Bastions on the outside. Or same with Vanguards. Graves. So Graves is 2 range unit and is melee and fires like projectiles in a cone, dashes, and deals more damage per projectile. So if we look at his stats, looks like left here or right here is going to be the strongest, similar to just this is just generally your placement kind of strategy for melee. You want to, if you have him 3-star and fully itemized, you want him to be like same side your enemy carry. So like let's say this, you know, ideally you can burst through this. If they don't have that much frontline here, then you can go straight to the backline, right? Whereas if you're in the middle and they have, you know, like something like this, you kill here, he might start going this way, maybe he goes this way, but then they have another unit here, so you have to like kind of kill all these units before you can get to their main carry. Whereas if you're here, there is a chance that he could just kill off this and then go straight here, especially if this unit also dies right before this one dies. All right, Illaoi, deal magic damage to enemies within 1 hex, reduce their magic resist by 15 for the rest of combat. So Illaoi has utility in the magic resist shred. So you want Illaoi on the same side as your carry. Let's say you have an AP, you know, unit here. You want Illaoi to be same side, and Bastion you want on the outside. And also is within 1 hex. So you don't mind. You really want Illaoi on the outside, and you want the enemy units to wrap around him, especially if you have units that are AoE. Like Veigar. Veigar hits adjacent enemies. So if you can like do a stone plate type formation, and then they wrap around, and if Veigar was hitting this, Veigar will hit all adjacent enemies, and Illaoi will reduce all of their magic resist. So you definitely want Illaoi on the outside of your frontline formation, right? And not on the inside. Because then, you know, let's say it's something like this. Illaoi is only going to shred this single Poppy, whereas he's going to shred 2 here, and if this was here, then he could shred 3. Whereas if it was swapped like this, Illaoi would only be shredding this 1 Poppy. And you could see that, you know, the stats look better on the outside here, 55, 56.5, 55, whereas 54 in the middle, right? So Illaoi, you definitely want the outside of your formation. All right, Jhin. bouncing grenades, sundering them. If he's your main carry, you probably want him in the corner. The reason his stats are probably better here is he's probably more of a utility unit than a main carry. Maybe he's a main carry at some point in the set. But if he's a utility, you want him towards the middle. But because he does have Sundering, you want to put him same side as your main carry. So like, let's say you're carrying Aphelios, and you want him same side because he gets that Sunder in, and you want, let's say this is Sejuani, you want them to hit the same target so that he can shred for your Aphelios. So that's why I suspect his stats. It's interesting that his stats are better in the middle. And that is likely because he throws a bouncing grenade that hits 4 enemies. So that 4 enemies will pretty much hit all of the front line. So basically anywhere like near your main carry is probably fine. All right, LeBlanc is a scaling AP unit, similar to LeBlanc's in the past, and gets more sigils. So she is like Heimer from last set, which means if you're main carrying her, corner is usually best. Although I think for the most part, you're not main carrying her. You just kind of throw her in the middle. It doesn't make too big of a difference. Naafiri is a melee unit. Nothing too special about her. Usually you're going to place her on the sides. Yeah, you can see the win rates are just going to be higher here. We've talked about why melee units want to be on the side. Rhaast, knock the target into the air for 1.75 seconds. And Vanguard. So with Vanguard, you want on the outside of your formation to get that, make sure their shield is being attacked and not wasting that shield after 10 seconds. But you want to put them in front of the enemy main tank to stun them and increase the likelihood that you can kill them before they cast or before they heal. So who is it? We said Rhaast and was it Alistar, right? Alistar we want to put right in front of their main tank. All right, Shyvana. Every second for the rest of combat, heal and deal magic damage to adjacent enemies. Gain max health and 10% damage. Yeah. So usually, that's interesting. I would have thought Shyvana in the middle would be stronger because you want people to surround her to deal magic damage to adjacent enemies, especially if a 3-star Shyvana with like something like this, right? But yeah, I'd be interested to know why these stats are stronger on the outside. If anybody happens to know, I suspect maybe part of it is Shyvana can be played in 6 Bastion and then you just kind of throw her. But if you're main tanking a 3-star Shyvana for like a Nitro reroll angle, I suspect this is the optimal placement. And so the stats right now might not reflect that. It might be lower win percentage in the middle because Shyvana Nitro reroll is just not good right now in this current PvE cycle. Right, Skarner is a Vanguard Boombot. Gains a shield. Deals damage. Nothing too special. Seems like just in the middle is going to be the strongest. Twisted Fate. Syndicate. Rapid Fire. Rapid Fire gains scaling attack speed. Gains 2 AP every attack. So Rage Blade's going to be good and is a scaling champion, which if you are main carrying him, like a 3-star, you probably want to put in the corner to be safe. Red card hits enemies in a 1 hex area. Okay, yeah. Mainly corners look like it's going to be the best if you're main carrying TF. Main Anima Squad Slayer, rapidly fire 3 attacks. Nothing too special. If you're primary carrying, going to be on the outsides. Veigar. So Veigar does magic damage to adjacent enemies. Which means that you want to move him depending on where the enemy's kind of clumped up. So I would take these with a grain of salt. I mean, part of it is you just put him in corner to be safe. But if you know your opponent is like bumped in the middle like this, then optimal placement would actually be right here in the middle because then you can hit the Poppy and these two at the same time. That's also why if you are playing reroll and this is like a 3-star, Something like a stone plate with Poppy with Veigar can be quite good because again they would wrap like this. Veigar would have started here and still be able to attack here, right? But for the most part, if you just want default corner, it's safe. If, for example, they were like this, then Veigar here would actually be more optimal placement. All right, 3 costs. Braum gains a shield, and he has utility. Chills the 3 closest enemies. And nothing too special about his Kingpin bonus. So similar to what we talked about with Alistar and Rhaast with their stuns, you want to put Braum somewhere near enemy tank. But if they don't have much of a front line, like let's say they have something like this of a front line and everything else is very heavy backline, or even they have like a stone plate solo front line here, then let's say they have a Zeri in the back. Although Zeri kind of moves around, right? But let's just say it was not moving that much. Then you would actually want Braum somewhere like here, because Braum could come up here, and then hopefully if you kill off some of these units, or maybe some of the other units are spread out, then he might be able to actually chill the Zeri here. So you can kind of see that his win rate is slightly higher like here, not really in the middle, and not all the way on the side. Because usually you probably just want to chill like their main tank. But if you can happen to chill their backliner, it's really good. Also, if the enemy has a Graves or something, or some type of melee carry, then putting the Braum on the same side, chilling their main melee carry, can be extremely valuable. So don't sleep on Braum's chill effect against main carries, especially against melee units. All right, Draven, hurl 2 massive axes at the most enemies in a line. So this is actually similar positioning to Seraphine, I believe. Although Seraphine hits the current target, whereas Draven will pick the most enemies in a line. So this really depends on how they're positioned. Like let's say if something like this, I don't actually know his range of the line. I think it can go whole board. So if you happen to know, or I'm getting this wrong, let me know with a timestamp in the comments. But something like this is good. Something like this can also work. Looks like in the stats, middle is usually better. But I suspect part of that might be that you're not always carrying Draven. So then if you're not main carrying, these stats I would not rely on that much. A big part of it is really just optimizing for positioning to hit their, if they're carrying a Veigar and they're kind of centering with solo frontline Poppy 3, Veigar 3, and they're clumped here, then you want to position middle too to hit all the way across, right? But if they're kind of like this, then this would be more optimal. So use your brain, scout with Draven. There's no global optimal for Draven. Elise fires 4 lasers, 4 more split between 2 enemies, and reduces MR. So if Elise is your main carry, then just corner's probably safest. Otherwise, similar to Aphelios, I believe. Or no, it was Jhin. Jhin has the Sunder, right? And so I was saying you should put Jhin near, your main carry. But for Elise, if you're carrying I don't know, another AP unit, you want to put Elise same side so that the split lasers also reduce the MR of these 2 units. So you get that effect. So if you're main carrying Elise, corner is good. If you're relying on her for utility, then near your main carry is good. Fiddlesticks. For 3 seconds, tether to the closest 3 enemies. Splitting magic damage between them. Apply shred and heal Fiddlesticks. If you're main carrying Fiddlesticks, it looks like, let's see, somewhere in the middle here is good because I believe he's 2 range and he hits enemies, closest 3 enemies. So just in the middle, it lets him, do his effect a lot. But actually, it seems like here and here are also really good. So actually, I'm not quite sure. If you can hit their backliner, let's say like here, if Fiddlesticks can tether all the way to the back because they're closer than like units over here, it might be optimal to place Fiddle on the side. Otherwise, you're usually just staying in the middle to stay safer, depending on how strong your front line is. Like, let's say enemy carries here. If you kill all these units first, then you're not taking aggro. Whereas here, if they have a stronger carry on this side, like let's say Zyra, then they kill off this, and then the Fiddle's kind of taking aggro, right? So I suspect that's why middle's a little bit stronger. But also it depends if you're like 3-star. The other thing is a lot of times, I think BIS Fiddle is Archangel. So just keeping him safe and while he's scaling can be really good. Plus, if you're playing Fiddle more so for utility and not primary carrying, then the shred effect you want just same side as your main carry, just like Elise. So these stats are kind of maybe misleading depending on how you are using Fiddlesticks. Galio gains durability, afterwards heal, send a whirlwind at the enemy within 3 hexes, stunning them. Okay, so we have some utility here with Galio. So let's say that we have an enemy carry over there. You see, this is the highest win rate by a lot, 52.7. Much lower in the middle, 42. So here, if the enemy tank is here, Galio can walk up and then hit within 3 hexes that dealt the most damage, right? Sends a whirlwind and stuns them. So pretty much you just, if you have Galio, you just always place them here, especially if the enemy carries back here. And if you're facing against a Galio, you do not want to put your main carry on this side. Even here's not good. You usually want to default to this side if you're playing against a Galio. Because here, let's say, they place the tank here, then Galio can't walk up to these, and so can't stun, because this is 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So if you have a main carry, you do not want to let Galio walk up here, and then he could stun Zyra back there. So make sure if you're playing against Galio, keep in mind that this stun can be very deadly, and so you want to keep Galio at least 4 hexes away from your main carry. If you're playing Galio, putting him in the side, 52.7, 49.7, highest. Gragas heal. Dealing magic damage. Nothing too special. Pretty similar win rates across the board here. Jarvan, strike the most enemies in a semicircle. Shield. And reduce their armor. So does have utility effect. Stats don't look too different. You just want to put him same side your main carry, and that way you can shred your opponent's tanks. Okay, Jinx fires 5 rockets at random enemies within 2 hexes. Each cast fires an additional rocket. So Jinx wants to cast a lot. This is like an AD version of Heimer, gains more and more rockets over time. Usually if you're main carrying her, you just put her in the corner. Keep her safe. Mordekaiser, gain a shield, slam in a 2x line and stun all enemies hit. So because he kind of fires in a 2x line, he's going to be better on the sides coming in, because like let's say he's here, he can like hit all 3 of these units, I believe. Whereas if he's like kind of in the middle here, he might only hit like 2 of them or 2 of them, right? So that's why it seems like the stats here, 53%, 53%, are much higher than the middle. So Mordekaiser, similar to Galio, you want on the outside. And on top of that, Galio is a Bastion, so Bastion you want on the outside anyway. Bruisers you don't usually want on the outside, but because of the stun effect, you want Mordekaiser on the outside to be able to stun more units because he stuns in like kind of a wave, 2-hex line wave. Rengar is kind of like Smeech, jumps around, and each cast increases leap range. Leap to the lowest health enemy in 2 hexes. Seems like just starting him in the middle makes the most sense. So let's see if we can try to reverse engineer. If enemy carry is in one of these corners, and usually something like this, so he can jump to like kind of 2 hexes away and then attack here, and then his range increases to 3, so then he can jump 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's why middle is always the best. You want jump 2 and then 1, 2, 3. If you start here, it might go 1, 2, and then it can't go. This is then this would be 4 hexes away. All right, so that's why Rengar middle. You just always default Rengar middle. You do not want to start here, because this goes 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. All right, Senna. Attacks deal damage to adjacent enemies, so similar to Veigar. Fire being 2 hexes beyond the current target. Seems like the middle is stronger than the corners, and that makes sense because it hits adjacent units. If you just do here, it will only hit this Poppy. Whereas if you do like here or here, it'll hit 3 units. So in general, Senna middle, if your main carrying, is going to be stronger, and works really well for like if you have a solo 3-star frontliner with like Stoneplate, because then they wrap, and then you can hit all of them. Because it's only 2 hexes beyond the current target, it's not that great. But for example, if you had a, what is it called? Sniper's Focus, then I believe it should be able to get all the way to the back line. So then in that case, it's kind of like, what was it, Draven or Seraphine, where you want to position it in a line where you can get a straight line to the backliner. So that depends on what items you have. All right, Varus fires a chain that deals magic damage and stuns for 1 second. Chain links to the closest 3 enemies, dealing magic damage to each. If you're main carrying, it seems like most of the time Varus is kind of like a utility in the middle. You want to kind of stun the enemy main tank. So again, if the Alistar is like 3-star, you want to stun that. If you're carrying, you just put him in the corner. Yuumi. Launch a magic missile, bounces to the nearest enemy, marking both of them, deal more damage. Main carry, corner. Yep. And usually you want her same side as enemy carry, because she does have that bounce to the nearest enemy. So if this is the main carry, then if this one's dead, then she could bounce over here if there's not any other close units, right? It really depends on if your frontline is stronger than their frontline, but you might want to take advantage of that bounce effect. All right, now we have the forecasts. Annie, throw a fireball. Has mini fireballs that are split depending on how much amp you have. Every forecast, summon Tibbers, dealing magic damage to enemies within 1 hex. If you're main carrying, just corner is good. Aphelios is a Rageblade holder. Usually that means corner if he's your main carry. He does have a Chakram or Moonblast that hits the largest group of enemies, damage to enemies within 2 hexes. So if you're dual carrying like Annie and Aphelios, because they're both Golden Ox, like you could put Aphelios here, because especially if you have something like what is it? Red buff. Like putting him slightly more middle could actually allow him to hit the largest clump more effectively. So that's something to keep in mind. Brand, throw a paint bomb at the largest group of enemies. A lot of times you want Brand to be holding like Morello or red buff. Usually if you're main carrying, you're going to put corners. If he's like kind of secondary carry or main Morello spreader, like putting middle is actually not bad. And you can see in the stats that these three are better than this and this. For the main reason that he can kind of throw at a larger group of enemies. Like for example, if he's here, but they have a bunch of tanks here, like, and main carries back here, Brand can't really reach this clump, I don't believe. Whereas if he's in the middle, he can. So part of this depends on like how the enemy is positioned. Usually you probably want to be same side enemy carry so that you can throw the bomb in a space that will start burning the enemy carry. Cho fire a sound blast in a cone. Anytime there's a cone, usually that means sides are going to be better than middle, and you can see that 51%, 50%, even second row like 40, 54, 53 is more than the middle. So I believe that was similar to what Mordekaiser that does 2x line. Yeah. The Mordekaiser and Cho are similar, like you want to put on the sides of your front line. Leona, durability, magic damage, stun the center enemy. I don't think there's anything too special about her. Usually if you're playing her, she's your main tank, so somewhere in the center is good. Misfortune fires a wave of bullets towards the largest clump of enemies. Corner, if she's your main carry, is usually good. This spot's interesting. I wonder... Actually, it's interesting. This second spot is high. So this spot is higher win rate than both of these, although frequency is lower. So this could be a sample size thing, or if like she's a secondary carry. But I assume it's just corners best. If you happen to know that why these two might have higher win rates because it maybe more optimally like gets a better angle to hit backline, please let me know in the comments. That'd be really helpful, both to me and to other viewers. But I think by default, Misfortune, you just put in corner. Nico, standard frontliner. Center is better by a lot. Third pop chills enemies. I don't think there's anything that's special. Like, usually if you're playing Nico, it's like with Strategist, 3 man, and she's your main tank, so just middle's good. Sejuani is the AoE stunner of this set for the main tanks. Throws EMP at current target, explodes, and then stuns within 3 hexes. So, okay, so actually, there is a world where putting Sejuani here can explode and then deal damage within 1, 2, 3 hexes. So it's a little bit similar to Galio, where you can walk up and then hit 3 hexes. I think for the most part, you're just gonna center if Sejuani is your main tank, because if your main tank's like on the side, like that could be troublesome. So this could be a situational thing. Like if you have a 6 Bastion frontline, then like, you know, side's not as bad. But if you have like a 2 Bastion frontline, like you usually should just put middle, otherwise you could get wrapped really hard. But if you have a 6 Sentinel or 6 Bastion frontline, you could try to go for like a situation where you can bomb and then hit the enemy carry. Throws EMP at the current target, dealing magic damage to enemies within 3 hexes. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so it's, I don't think it's usually gonna hit this. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So I think for the most part, it's just in the middle for Sejuani. Vex, Omnivamp, Shadow. Nothing too special. If you're main carrying Vex, it just looks like it's just the corners. Secondary carry can go more in the middle. Xayah, 6 feathers. Seek out nearby enemies within 2 hexes. Should just be corner for main carry, and the stats show that. Alright, Zed is a melee. Zed, I think, is very interesting because he's also an assassin, and he throws a shuriken at the furthest unmarked enemy within 4 hexes and then teleports to them. So stats wise, seems here are the highest, and then 1, 2, 3 are also reasonably high. Shuriken at the furthest unmarked enemy within 4 hexes. All right, so let's try to reason this out. So if he's here, 1, 2, 3, 4 can hit the backliner. But usually, let's see, if he's here, he walks up here, 1, 2, 3, can't hit the corner from this spot. But if he happens to walk up here, then 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you're facing Zed and you want a solo frontline, although I guess if he walks up here, okay, I guess if you're facing a solo frontline enemy, like let's say you have something like this, I think you want to block off this middle spot here, because this spot here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hexes from the corner. So if your enemy is in a corner, you don't want Zed to be in the middle. Whereas here, he can walk up here. And that's why 44.3, this spot is actually the highest in the front line. And then this looks like this and this are second and third. So from here, Zed can also hit this corner, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if like, you know, something like this. So I think you don't want Zed to go in the middle. So put another unit here, and then if your Zed is squishy, you might want to start him like back here, because 45.9 is even higher than this. So it seems like this is the safest spot for Zed to end up here, and then here to here, right? So basically you want Zed same side, end up on either this square or this square to get to the corner. This also works because, okay, if enemy tank is here, then this can also get to the corner. Same thing with here. So if you're playing against Zed, you do not want to put a unit here, because then Zed could get within 4 units of your carry. Here's okay, because then if it walks here, then it'll actually like jump 1, 2, 3, 4 here instead of here. In fact, that would actually be a better way of baiting Zed away from your main carry here. But I think for the most part, I would probably lean towards like doing something like this, where Zed walks up here or Zed walks up here. And that actually here allows both sides, right? Depending on where the enemy like tanks are. But I think for the most part, it's just, if your Zed is fully itemized, you have like survivability on him, like Edge of Night, I'd probably just start him here or here, so he doesn't like have to spend too much time walking. Yeah, so third from the left or third from the right seems optimal for Zed, unless the enemy carry is here and they have a tank here. Then this is actually optimal. Same thing with this. So if you're playing Zed, be on the lookout for someone that's put their tanks here on the same side. The main thing is you want Zed to be 4 hexes away from the enemy carry. Zeri, standard Rageblade holder corner should be by default. And Ziggs. Every time I say Zeri, my iPhone thinks I'm calling Hey Siri. Alright, Ziggs, interestingly, middle has higher win rate. There was a bomb that hits the most enemies in a whole row and column with the Cyber Boss. I suspect it's higher in the middle because he just has more range to like kind of do the whole row and column. Whereas like if he is, let's say, you know, here, I don't know. There's like some formation where like, because he can reach a unit better, he can access a row or column that he wouldn't otherwise be able to if he was in the corner. So I think the similar logic was true for Brand, where like, yeah, some of the middle hexes, like 55.3, 55.4 is higher than this one, right? Same thing is true for Ziggs. And so both of these are really good AoE spreaders, especially if they're a secondary carry, then middle is where you want to prioritize them. If they're your primary, you can kind of figure out like, and part of this might depend on the enemy positioning, whether you want to center Ziggs or corner for safety. And a big part of that also depends on like if the enemy has like a Zed or not, for example. All right, 5 costs. Aurora, for the most part, I believe wants to be in backline. If anybody actually knows, when she casts and goes to your bench, and then when the unit dies, pops back in, where does she pop back in? Does she just pop to the back row, or does she pop to where like she started? Because like a lot of times you actually want to have her swap with like a unit like Zac, for example. And if Zac, I wonder if that's why frontline is actually high percentage here, even though it's super low frequency. And so maybe this logic doesn't even apply. If you happen to know, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. But like if you frontline her, which allows her to cast, she goes to safety, and then if she went to the backline, especially because like Zac would pop in, if you have her backline and she like casts, goes out, and then Zac's in the backline, Zac has to walk up. Whereas if Zac's already on the front line, and Zac splits into 2, so like Zac, if Aurora went back into the front line when Zac dies and then splits into the 2 copies, then those 2 copies could protect the Aurora, depending on what the order of operations is. So I think there's probably still a lot to optimize on that. And I suspect, I don't know, maybe that's why this is 57 and this is 55. So if you happen to know, let me know in the comments, please. But otherwise, by default, if she's main carry, usually it's corners. 54 in the middle looks like she's reasonably high. And she hits the most enemies in a line. So this could be similar to like the whole Ziggs and Brand effect. All right, Garen, just a pretty standard melee unit. Nothing too special. Like melee units on the outside are usually going to be higher. Kobuko is pretty much a tank. Main tank in the center. See if there's anything. Oh, he does knock up all enemies within 2 hexes. Picks up a nearby enemy, knocks up all enemies within 2 hexes, then slam down. So you probably want him like near the enemy main tank to stun them for the same reason as like Alistar, Rhaast, Galio. Or no, Galio hits within 3 hexes, so not exactly the same analogy. And percent of the target's max health is magic damage. So I think usually it's, because it's percent of the target's max health as magic damage to all enemies hit. So you definitely want to put Kobuko in front of their highest health, especially if they have like a Warmog, right? It's going to deal this percent health across all enemies within 2 hexes. It's going to deal more damage to all of these if it's right in front of this, as opposed to slamming this and only dealing, if this is like a 1-star Poppy, it's going to, the ult AoE magic damage is going to be far less than if he's ulting the Sejuani. Which usually I think you're just putting in middle if he's your main tank. Renekton is a melee carry. Does have burn and wound to enemies within 2 hexes. So if you're using him for his anti-heal effect, you probably want middle. If you're using him as a main carry, then usually melee is going to be on the sides. So where you place Renekton is probably a function of how you are using him, whether you're relying on him for anti-heal or not. If you are, you want to put him in front of main enemy tank. If you are fully itemizing him, then and using him as a carry, then outside. Samira dashes towards target and will dash and then deal a bunch of damage and then bounces back. Looks like corners, just your standard carry, gonna be safest. Urgot, if you're using as a carry, looks like corners, but pretty even across the board. Also has execute. So I think the execute actually is why middle is slightly better, because enemy tanks usually in the middle, especially if they have a lot of HP, the execute value is extremely good. So I think if you're using him as utility for the execute, if he's not itemized, middle is really good. If you're using him as a main carry, you could still do middle or likely corner for safety. So don't sleep on the execute. All right, Viego will jump in, shred, deal magic damage to adjacent enemies. Looks like middle is best, and that makes sense because you just want him to get to the largest clump. So right here, middle, you don't want him to take aggro, like surround him with tanks. Is good, or if you're worried he's going to take too much damage, you can second row him. But pretty much Viego is going to be in the middle. And then Zac. Zac looks like pretty much standard tank, highest win rate in the middle. Bounces 3 times on nearby enemies and stuns them. So it does have a stun effect, but usually if you're using Zac, he's going to be your main tank, or it could be you want to stun the enemy main tank, but you could also use him from a utility standpoint. It depends how they're positioned. If they're like spread out like something like this, then if Zac can stun, walk up here and hit the nearest 3 units, bounce, and stun their main carry, that could be really good too. So by default, you could just put here, but if there's a situation where the enemy is like kind of isolating their main carry, and you can get that stun value, that could be really good on the sides. All right, so that covers all of the units in set 14 and how to position them. I hope that you found this analysis helpful. I hope that you're able to learn some of the more abstract principles of how to position units and get to know a lot of the units of this set better. I would love to hear your thoughts on the video, whether it's from the meta mindset and how you're approaching set 14 maybe differently, or just where I might have gotten some positioning wrong. I'm always open to feedback, and I'm learning in the process as well. So I appreciate you watching this whole video and getting to this point. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.